Okay, number 10. You think paying your taxes, and I say your with inverted commas, you think paying your taxes gives you some kind of rights or a voice in policy?
Of course.
Yeah, this is so fallacious. Okay, you do not have taxes. People do not pay their taxes. Okay, people surrender money under the threat of violence or prison. This is the understanding that I have, and I think it's very difficult to challenge. Even if you agree that taxation is a good idea, there is absolutely no dispute that there's a threat. And I think this is probably a good time to just introduce the idea of the non-aggression principle, which is basically the concept that the initiation of violence or aggression, or what is called aggression, is illegitimate. To begin by punching somebody in the face is wrong. Now, it's okay to respond with appropriate and measured force, calculated force, not just shoot back with a nuclear weapon or whatever. But there is a scale, but included in this principle, included in this non-aggression principle, is the idea that the threat of violence is equal to violence itself because it accomplishes the same thing. If you go up to somebody in the street and you put a knife to their throat and say, "Give me your wallet," you don't have to cut their throat to get the wallet. And in fact, it's far preferable if you don't, because then you can return next month and ask them for their wallet again, assuming you've given them enough time and room to do that. It's not preferable for government to use violence. They don't want to, but they do. It is preferable to use the threat of violence, which is to put you in prison if you do not pay your taxes, or worse, if they will fine you more if you don't pay your taxes. Give me 10 grand if you don't do that. Well, give me 20 grand then, and if you don't do that, you go to prison, and everybody else who pays taxes pays for your meals. It's just the most insane idea that anybody could support. Now, it's okay. I'm not against. I would advise people to pay taxes in the sense that there isn't really an ethical consideration under force and violence. But what I would do is encourage people that, when there are opportunities to not pay tax, absolutely avoid tax. And when the time comes, hopefully that, we'll get to a point as a society, as a society, we'll get to the point where there will be enough of us, and we'll be aware there probably is already enough of us who do not like the idea of taxation, and we'll have a non-violent solution to getting rid of that kind of an idea. But right now, nobody pays. Now, there might be people out there who want to pay taxes, and they see, okay, I disagree with you, Gar. I think the government is a great thing, or maybe it's flawed, but it certainly has benefits, and I would pay my taxes. Well, that's fine. So do away with the threats, and let's see who pays for it. If you still want to pay for it, that's fine. But forcing me to, and of course, you're dealing with this problem, and this is something that has started to make me very nervous these days. I've started to realize when you're dealing with people like that, you talk to somebody and say, well, look, the government is a very good idea. That's fine. I mean, that's your opinion. There's nothing wrong with your opinion on that one if you think that's true. But what the problem is that you're saying that if I don't agree with you, then I should go to prison if I don't pay my taxes, or if I don't. You're advocating violence against me, and so now we've got an issue. Now we've got a problem.
I mean, the big problem I have with it is that essentially it's not like paying taxes as we would have done with earlier forms of technology. Essentially, if you work as a pay-as-you-earn worker, the state who has a monopoly on violence are essentially prescribing that your taxes are taken from you at the point where you get paid without you having any say in it whatsoever. And they have the monopoly of the threat of violence over you. So essentially, you have no choice in the matter. You don't actually physically go to a government office and hand over your taxes when you have the money. It's taken off you before the money even comes through to your account. And if you don't, as you said, you go to jail.
Well, of course, and this is the problem that, when you're dealing with a large portion of the population, this is the case that they don't even see the money, so they don't feel like it's being taken. They just ignore that column on the pay slip that says PRSI and these taxes. But the problem is that businesses act as proxy tax collectors, and of course self-employed people who have to pay voluntarily like 5 different types of taxes just straight away: income tax and
of no
PAYE
benefits if everything goes wrong either.
Absolutely. So yeah, it's these entrepreneurs and people like that who really shoulder the burden, but at the same time they're also promised things in return that sweeten the deal. Because if I can't get people to, like, let's say an entrepreneur tomorrow said, I don't want to pay these taxes, well, here's the option: his business gets shut down and he goes to prison. Whereas if he pays the taxes and he collects the money from his staff, then
Yeah,
He'll have a business.
Yeah, he can
Yeah,
earn future profits, and
absolutely.
himself.
He'll earn future profits and he'll provide employment, and at the same time he'll be able to find all sorts of tax loopholes and little incentives to, you get paid back if you do this, that, and the other that the government wants. So really, they're just taking money and they give it back to you if you do what they tell you. They give back a large portion of it to businesses who do what they tell them. And of course, this is why we're in debt, because if you imagine that tax is there to pay for stuff, then why is there a debt? Well, there's a debt because they give all the money back to people who do as they ask. They use that as collateral to buy votes and to buy certain behaviors. So yeah. Okay, so number 9, you think a tax break is an incentive?
Oh yeah, this is a real good one. Yeah, we had lots of tax breaks in this country centered around the property boom. There was the Section 63 tax breaks, which basically encouraged people to buy a certain type of dwelling as an investment property. And of course, a tax break is basically an incentive for people to basically invest in something they normally wouldn't have invested in. So you're creating malinvestments, which means you've created the business cycle, which means you're on the road to ruin already.
Absolutely. So there's actually 2 sides to this, because that side is obviously very, very damaging when you don't have you basically have the government able to manipulate businesses, like we were talking about in the previous point, by providing breaks for people who do this and that and the other. But on the more moral side of it, you have this issue where somebody tells you, it would be like somebody breaking into your home and they take your television and your furniture and your jewelry, and then they say, okay, listen, next month we're not going to take your television, your furniture, and your jewelry. We're just going to take your television. So don't worry about it. And you're supposed to go, hey, the government loves me, it loves my business. This burglar loves me and my family. They're just coming back. So because what they really want is they want to give you enough room to breathe. In the same way a farmer with cattle wants to give them enough room that they're not bashing their heads off walls and stuff, so that they have enough grass to get nice and fat, so that they can cut them up and eat them as steak at the end of the week. I mean, this is what they're doing, man. And a tax break, you're supposed to be thankful. Okay, yeah, sure. I'm thankful that I have more stuff now, but I'm certainly not thankful that you're still taxing me. You're still taking my stuff. I mean, I'm not supposed to think you're a saint now because you've just decided to steal less stuff from me.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thankful, that you're taking something that, I had no choice in the matter of you taking, and if I don't, it's through punishment that, I have to. It's coercive. It's unbelievable. It'd be like somebody kidnapping you off the street and saying, well, we're only going to hold you for 2 hours, and next week when we come back, because of our tax break, it's only going to be an hour.
I know, it's completely nonsense. It's an absolute nonsense. Okay, number 8, you voluntarily hold bonds or a state pension, and by bonds I mean government bonds, state bonds.
Yes, you voluntarily hold. You would need your head examined if you were to buy either of the above products. This continually happens. How anybody can buy any government bonds or invest in a state pension. Essentially, these are your future earnings that you're purchasing, allegedly at a discounted rate now. But your future earnings are determined by future taxation, which is only going to have to go up to repay these bonds and to repay the state pensions in the future.
And there's a couple of really significant observations I'd like to make about the complete, absolute criminal behavior. Aside from the fact that the bonds and the pension is not, the money that you pay in is not being saved or invested in anything kind of safe. It's being spent immediately to pay off.
It's already being spent.
It's actually okay at this point. It's gone. It is gone. The state pension is gone. So old people now are consuming every penny that you put in today. So you, Alec, if you were to pay into this pension, it's being spent on them now because that money is gone. So if you invest in a pension today, the only way that you're going to get something out of it is by the government's ability to tax people in the future, which is your kids and your grandkids. Now, that doesn't strike me as the most legitimate business practice.
No. I mean, Bernie Madoff went to prison, didn't he?
Yes, yeah. Lots of people go to prison for pyramid schemes, they're called. The government themselves outlaws it. But aside from the hypocrisy of government engaging in a pyramid scheme that they outlaw everywhere else, they also engage in another devious practice, which is on the one hand they drive. Now I know this is collaboration with the EU, but the state pensions are also where they drive down the interest rate so that somewhere now, what is it, 2% across the somewhere around the 2% floating around there. So if you're going to loan to somebody today and you give them money, or a bank is going to do it, they give a loan for 2%. And this is supposedly a great thing because you can borrow and it's cheap. Now, the problem is, if I want to lend someone, if I give my money into a bank and I had savings, they would loan my money out for a 2% return. Now, so there, you give out, if someone came to you, Alec, and said, I want 10 grand, dude, I had this real great business I want to invest in. I don't have the money. Can you help out? Give me 10 grand. And in 5-10 years, I will give you 2%. So if you give me 10 grand, what are you getting back again? 200 euros? Are you going to give me 10 grand for 200 euros?
What's the inflation rate?
And what's the now this is critical, because if the inflation rate is higher than the interest rate, you are losing money when you invest in projects like this.
You're going to sit at home and burn €1 a day.
You may as well burn it. So not only is the money being spent immediately, now this is the government know this is why they spend it immediately, because they can spend it while it's worth something. Because if they wait, then they hold on to that money for you, it's still not going to pay for anything when you come to claim your pension or your bonds. So do not invest in state pensions. Do not buy bonds. The post office is pushing it like crazy. There's posters all over the place where they're like, "Hey, you need to buy it. You can buy this 30-year bond, this 15-year bond."
And let's just explain to people about bonds. Is certainly in this country, we air quotes, or we recapitalized the banks. So what the government did was, to get the interest rates down on the money the government borrow, is actually told the banks to go and buy bonds. So now all the capital that's sitting in Irish banks is actually government bonds. I mean, nothing can go wrong there.
It's absolutely insane that we still have some kind of economic structure. It really is a matter of a very short period of time before this all goes bust. So what I would say is, any kind of money you get, don't save it. Buy something valuable. Buy gold, buy silver, buy other currencies anywhere else. Maybe not dollars. They're a similar kind of a situation. But yeah, buy tangible things that aren't subject to this kind of manipulation. Okay, 7. You think there's such a thing as government corruption? Now, this is to me kind of like an oxymoron, and it's not just because I'm kind of this crazy anti-government guy. Government corruption is so strange to me, because what is government for? And if you look at the fundamental principle behind it, it takes its money, it steals money out of people's pockets using the threat of violence, or out of businesses and out of people who are self-employed in that. They take money under the threat of violence. They use that money to invest in projects that get them votes into office. Now, this is the politicians I'm speaking of specifically, and because it's the politicians we're speaking about when we talk about corruption, and all of their policies are basically based on trying to make people happy, who will give them votes in return. And it's not based on any kind of principle. It's not based on any kind like, when you look at democracy at its absolute root, this is what we call it. I mean, it's not like it's even a secret. This is what democracy is. You vote for people to do stuff that you want. It's not like, okay, we talk about a republic where you vote for people who are going to uphold the Constitution or something. But if that was the case, why would you need to vote for people? Wouldn't you just encourage people to uphold the Constitution? The whole point of voting people is to change it.
Why would you need to vote every 4 years? I think the point you're making there, Gareth, is that the government is inherently corrupt.
Yeah, it is, because I mean, okay, like, whatever it's for, whatever people mean when they say corruption. Oh, he took a backhander. He took money there in an envelope to do this, that, and the other. I'm sorry, what was he voted in for again? We were to pay him to do a thing. I mean, so what? Okay, so it's in a brown envelope. Is that what makes it corrupt? It's still money. I mean, we're paying them to do stuff that we want. Surely that's exactly what's happening when somebody hands a politician a brown envelope and says, "Hey, I want you to do this.
I want you to retract vast zones of land," I mean, but it's like saying, I mean, if we didn't have the system we have at the moment, and someone said, "All right, Gareth, here's what we're going to do. We're going to give you a list of 5 choices. And each of these 5 guys are going to be paid far more in their lifetime that you could possibly earn at the moment." Right? And they're going to steal your money, and they're going to drive around in cars that you've paid for, and they're going to actually hamper your economic life. What do you think? You would never put your hand up for a system like that, but that's the system we have.
I would say let's go for that, so long as I can vote every 4 years for who gets to do that to me.
Exactly, so somebody else can do it.
Yeah. So long as I can choose who gets to steal from me, that's what's critical here. You can see why the free education is so important. Okay, so point 6: you think it's a good idea to compose a jury in court of 11 random people with absolutely no experience in law or logic.
Yes, of course it is. Again, I mean, my line on this is, in Big Brother, in that awful reality TV show, they stick 10 or 15 people into a house. So all you need to do is find out who's watching that program every night, and then ask them, do they want to be a jury member? Because this is like reality TV. If somebody thinks they can sit there, they're in judgment of another person without any qualification on the subject at hand. It's absolutely scandalous in the modern world.
Oh, it's shocking. It's a remainder. It's more this kind of remainder of this old barbaric structure that kind of remained, because I guess people believe in this idea that, law is collaborative, and it's at least it's collaborative in the sense that you have a government that picks who.
But that's rule, It's mob justice.
It is. It's mob. It's a complete mob now, just because they put on nice clothes and sit in a box or whatever. I mean, they don't even put on nice clothes. We're talking about random people here. But what's most shocking about it is, to me, is that what happens is a government issues you a letter and say, hey, we want you to come into court. We're going to, assemble like 200 people for this round, and we're going to pick you randomly. Now, if you work, your employer has to give you that time off, except for in extenuating circumstances, and they have to pay your wages. So this is a kind of a free labor that the government gets. Your employer is paying for you to not do work for them, and instead to go up to some courthouse and basically look at some kind of evidence and try and make sense of that, even though you might be working in a video shop, or you might be a farmer, or you might be, that's what you specialize in. You do not specialize in law or logic, and you don't specialize in, even the whole point of being in a jury as well. Now you have, I'm not sure if we have it. I think we have something similar to something like jury nullification, where, but ultimately we're not really able to challenge the laws themselves. You have to try somebody based on the law that they're subject to. So let's say if I was called to a jury to serve in a jury service, and then the guy's being tried for not paying his television license or something that I find absolutely abhorrent, that somebody should have to pay a television license. I don't get to say he's innocent. I would still have to say he's guilty, because it has to be based on the law that I'm presented with, rather than the morality that I decide myself. So even if I am trained in law or logic, it doesn't actually matter, because I have to still go by their books. Now, there are exclusions to that. You can, but you would have to assemble the entire, you'd have to convince the whole jury, the 10 other people, that this is wrong. So for that reason, I mean, I don't know if this is a dangerous thing to say. I would not serve on a jury. I mean, I think it's criminal offense to turn it down if you don't have. You have to write to some guy, some comptroller guy, and say, I'm sick, or I lost a leg, or something terrible happened.
Against all races.
Right. It's a religious thing. I can't. It's against my religion, and you have to convince him. Well, I would kind of turn that around and say, well, if you want me to serve on a jury, you got to send me a letter asking me to appeal my decision not to show up, because I would not serve on a jury. And the comptroller,
you would then be tried by a jury of your peers.
Yeah, well, I would rather be tried by other people to, for that. I think I could make a pretty good argument there and then anyway. I'd get out of that, I'm sure. But no, I could not morally, I mean, unless it was some kind of clear-cut case, but it's not even my court. It's somebody else's. I would just hate. I hate courtrooms, man. there's this weird feeling there of these megalomaniacs who just like. So, and I'm not even joking. They're sociopaths, man. You see the judge get up there, and he's he's in a different planet. I mean, this is the king, and he's got these like you see the guards. If people are ever if you ever get intimidated when you're driving down the street and you see guards, or you're walking down the street, go to a courthouse and watch what happens when you see guards in front of a judge. They change. They are sniveling. little, like after every sentence, they're like, yes, judge, no, judge, sorry, judge. I, this, it's shocking. Sometimes I go down to the courthouse, just if I have spare time in town, and I kind of, I'm this close to bringing in a big bucket of popcorn and just kind of sitting there if I didn't think that I'd be singled out for, disrespect or held in contempt or something for eating popcorn in public property. But it's really anybody interested in psychology or this thing, I would go to I recommend you go to a courthouse, just watch the behavior of judges in these places. Stay away from them. These are bad people. Nothing good can come from these places. Okay, I don't know if you have any more on that.
No, you're okay.
Okay, number 5. We're getting there. This is going on quite long. Okay, we're trying to shoot through these last ones. It's getting late. Okay, you think it's a bigger deal to shoot a president or a policeman than any other person. You think it's a privilege to meet a politician or be invited to a politician's event. This is huge in the media, where like the shows like 24 or pretty much every TV show and every movie. I was a little disappointed with Iron Man. I liked Iron Man 1 and 2, and I liked Iron Man 3 too. It was a good movie. But the first Iron Man, here's this guy who initially begins his career by working for government, using his brain to make all these crazy weapons that benefit the government. And then as the movie progresses, he kind of sees that, oh my goodness, no, I don't want to be part of this. I'm going to do this myself. And he takes all his crazy resources and he makes himself a sweet suit. And he's just like, he's the boss man. He's taking care of business, and he's not. I mean, he's kind of a jerk every now and then, and a bit pretentious. Yeah. But ultimately, he's doing good with his mind and with his stuff. And he's this amazingly rich capitalist success story of being an entrepreneur. It's great. So there's 1 and 2, and then you have 3 where it's still. I'm not too sure if it was Iron Man himself, but the premise of the movie, particularly later on, was that, oh no, the president's been kidnapped, and we need to save the president. And it's like, really, what's the big deal here? I know you're dealing with a person, and so it's important that we to save people when they're in trouble, and the president was in trouble. So as a person, yes, and there was tons of people in trouble, but it was like all these other people are in trouble. It's like, oh no, we got to save them, and then the president, we have to make special care that we save him. It's like, wait, why is that a thing? Even there was a show that was on yesterday. It was just on the television in the background, and I overheard it, and the person was reading out like their expectations for their kid, and they were this little letter that they had written to their child when they were much younger, and they were reading it out, and it was like, you could grow up to be an astronaut or a fireman or even a president. And I was like, even a president? You just said an astronaut. Like you start with astronaut, and you could even be a president. No, an astronaut is way cooler than a president. Let me tell you, that's a fireman is cooler. A garbage man is better than every job that has any kind of productive capacity is better than a president. Is not a job. A president is somebody who takes stuff.
Anything,
Right. Okay. So it's just, and when we see it in movies all the time, reinforcing this idea that he shot a cop. And you've just seen this massive shootout between police and all these guys, and everyone's just getting shot all around the place. And then as soon as a cop gets hit, it's like red alert. You've just broken the fundamental rule of civilization.
But essentially, there is something wrong there, because taking it back to its base note, I mean, essentially we're saying, people saying that, I mean, it's basically saying that the office somebody holds or the uniform that they wear, that they wear every day, it has some correlation to, what happens to them is suddenly more important than what happens to a person, 5,000 miles away as a result of a drone strike or something like that. I mean, it's nonsense.
Well, that's huge, and I think, I mean, we all have experience with cops, but we don't all have experience with, folks in the Middle East who are just getting, randomly, weddings, and journalists and people are just getting blown up, and nobody, cares, because they're just
essentially. Yeah, the programs, I mean, and the films and the movies that you're talking about, if this was in Nazi Germany, we'd call it outright propaganda. And how can people live under this? It's, it's almost laughable, like the stuff the government spews out. But if it comes out of a Hollywood studio or a cable TV network, well, then, it's okay.
Well, that's right. We all know that Hollywood began as it was actually, wasn't it named something like it was before propaganda was a bad word.
Yes.
Before like Edward Bernays and these guys. It was a propaganda. It was like the propaganda. There was a propaganda wing of the military, and
right.
Hollywood was called something. This is why a lot of the early Hollywood movies are military based. The army worked very close to them, allowed them on scenes, and they were real planes and real soldiers in a lot of cases. Among the actors, so they lend themselves so that because you need to provide in a hard time of war, you need to have this solidarity, kind of like this national anthem kind of stuff, to make people side with you just because you're on this side of the world. I mean, it's really crazy if you were to. I remember going to a museum in Europe. It was a World War II museum, and seeing the propaganda on both sides. They had all these old posters and stuff. And this was in France. It was a little different than the picture you get over here. There was still a lot of Nazi propaganda that they had up there, because obviously the French aren't particularly sympathetic to the Nazis, but at the same time they weren't particularly sympathetic to the English and the Allies, and you saw the kind of propaganda that they were doing, and it was actually remarkably similar. It could have even been the same artist doing up these posters that show, like, you know, this sea monster coming out of the water, and it's got this big flag on it, you know, and it's just this evil demonic, and it was just, there's one with a Nazi flag and there's one with an English flag. It's the same stuff, and they pumped their guys full of this stuff, and really there is, you know, a war is, again, I'm just going to make a note of that, podcast number 8 or something. We'll get into that. So number 4, you think foreign aid is good, you think that the third world needs charity. The basic process is this, and this is for anybody who thinks, you know, foreign aid is such a great idea, and there's nothing more to it than that. You know, actually, if I could just start by saying, people in third world and developing countries are still people. Okay, they have brains and they know how to do stuff. They don't need the kind of help that we're giving them. So and here's a perfect example of it. So one thing that happens over here is that, okay, we'll begin with people get taxed, right? So the government acquires a whole bunch of money by stealing it. Now, what they do with that money, in certain cases, is they allocate money for farmers. They subsidize the production of certain things. So what'll happen is there'll be a shortage in a supermarket of a particular product to some farmer group. Now, not the farmers themselves, but a farmer kind of, you wouldn't call them an arbitrator, but they're like these groups, these unions between the farmers and the government, and they would appeal to the government that we need more of this particular product. So some politician, the Department of, you know, Agriculture, whatever, gets out and says, okay, let's allocate a subsidy to encourage farmers to produce more of this kind of thing, or maybe some kind of environmental thing. So, you know, this process, but so we're going to make a subsidy to make more of this thing. And so we end up with, let's take wheat, for example. We manufacture a whole bunch of wheat because farmers who were growing other things are now going to, you know, they're going to completely till the land, they'll level it, and they'll start growing wheat because they get sweeter money by selling wheat, because the government's going to pay them for it out of the stolen money. So you end up then, because farming is this massive process that takes time, it's not just you can just switch your fields now and all of a sudden we'll just make something else. This takes months, sometimes even years. And so they have all this crop of wheat. Now we've got too much wheat, so it gets too cheap. So what we do is we take the overage of wheat and we pay the government pays these farmers to donate, so they get tax write-offs of donated crops. So all this extra wheat, what happens is they donate that to charity. So they get all this extra stuff that they should never have been making in the first place. They give it to the Red Cross. Now, meanwhile, you go over to the third world, some part of Africa, where farmers are trying to grow wheat. So you have these wheat farmers. What they've done is, you know, they've seen all these people starving around them, their family, their friends. They've seen an opportunity. People need wheat. They can make bread. They can make all this kind of stuff. So I'm gonna take a loan from a loan shark at like 1,000% at great personal risk to myself, but I think it's worth it because I'll make that back in profit because people want this stuff. So he takes the money, takes it on a short term or whatever, builds his farm, takes care of his farm, hires people to help him with the farm, maybe just gets his family members to help out or whatever, and so heads to the market and says, great, we're going to sell this wheat, we're going to sell bread, we're going to sell all this kind of stuff, and we're going to turn this business around. We're going to start this, we're going to be an empire here, and we're going to build this up, and people are really going to love us and pay us and all this kind of thing. Red Cross flies their plane in and dumps a whole bunch of crates of free wheat as a donation from us kind Irish, people, or American or European or whatever. They dump it there. Now the farmers, who's going to buy it from the farmer when they can get it for free from the Red Cross? I mean, it's the most shockingly destructive thing you could ever do. I remember seeing it was a case a couple of years ago in Somalia where this thing exactly happened, where you had these guys that were being called Al Qaeda. I mean, they had nothing to do with the Somalia. These are just some small rebel guys who they were evil. They were stopping the Red Cross from getting humanitarian supplies to their people. Actually, what was happening was these rebels were keeping the Red Cross from undercutting their existing businesses so that they could recover and build an economy. So a little tip to people out there: stop giving stuff for free, dumping free products over there. I mean, imagine what a jerk move. I mean, imagine going into Tesco and start throwing out loaves of bread to everybody for free as they get to the till. They go to the checkout and you're throwing vegetables and chocolate and all this kind of stuff. Here you go, guys. Tesco, if they didn't shoot you on sight, I mean, they wouldn't do that, but they'd kick you off. Of course. I mean, that's ridiculous. Who would ever do that? And so because we see these third world, a lot of people in the third world as this kind of subspecies who can't do anything, we're like, oh, we have to help them out. We have to give them stuff because they can't do it themselves. Absolute nonsense. The whole purpose of this stuff is to keep these people in debt so that they can't compete with us over here. And a lot of these charities are just used. These are very well-meaning people, but they're used to completely keep them in subjection. So if we could just, like, it would be great if we could just put an end to foreign aid. Yeah, I don't know what you think about that, Alec.
Yeah, I mean, it's dangerous. I mean, the words aid are even dangerous because it's where it ends up. I mean, you're talking about there in terms like wheat, but I mean, think where the money ends up as well. It basically ends up in the pockets of corrupt regimes, most of the time brutal dictators who are there, at the behest of some Western power anyway, to keep some other group out that aren't in their favour for commercial interests. And then the cycle repeats itself. As you say, entrepreneurs try to break out. They're crippled by the aid and by the charity that we give them. And then, they're living in completely, terrible conditions because they're not allowed to flourish themselves, whether it's by their own government or by foreign governments. But again, it seems to be the government that's the issue with all of this.
Well, that's right. And yeah, that side of it, the financial side of it, a lot of larger corporations here, because they can avail of tax breaks when they donate to charity or donate to foreign aid, and they basically just get this money to these crazy, aside from as you said, aside from the actual products themselves, the corn and the wheat and the water and all this kind of thing. Instead of that, you just give money over. What you get, first of all, is you get a tax break of that amount. So you don't get taxed that. So it's a great way of avoiding tax. But why would you do that over getting taxed? Well, because you can get money to these dictators, and these are the people you want to get it to, because these are the people who are the only people who have economic freedom to purchase products from you. So if you're a corporation, you donate a whole bunch of money to these people, you're going to get it all back because you're going to do a deal with them. First of all, you get the tax break, but you get your money back because they buy these products from you. So if you're a weapons manufacturer, or if you're a vehicle manufacturer, or if you're any kind of infrastructure manufacturer at all, like telecoms, this kind of stuff that dictators want and keep to themselves. We're not talking about major national infrastructure. We're talking about just like personal for the dictator. He gets to spend all that money on these companies. They get it all back, and they get to keep their product moving and sell all their old product before they roll out the next one for us here in the West.
You're right, because I guess when we're talking about foreign aid, we're largely talking about Africa, and in particular sub-Saharan Africa. But people have to understand that's an area of the world that is so rich in resources, so rich in the likes of arable land, mineral deposits. There's only one reason why those people aren't living better economic lives. It's not through scarcity of resources, it's access to those resources, because they're being kept from them by their own government and by Western governments.
That's right, and if we didn't prop them up, then it wouldn't take long for them to turn it around. And I think, but that is something that's inherently scary to people over here, and maybe not the vast majority of people, but certainly the political class and the corporate class.
Definitely.
Okay, number 3, you think government is essential to civilization. And I kind of sum this up in the syllogism that because all governments exist where there is wealth, you jump to the conclusion that government then must therefore create wealth rather than be attracted to wealth because they feed on it. And I just to make it as simple as possible, you could prove this with a very logical, to use one of Mises' terms, praxeology. You could do this. Yes. What you do is you work through the process and see if it's possible. Just without evidence, you don't need evidence for this. Like in the same way that we know that something that is entirely black can also not be entirely white. That's a praxeological statement, a judgment. Two parallel lines will never intersect. This is stuff you don't need evidence for. You can just work this out. So here's another one, just to give you confidence that it's possible to do this without empirical evidence. Governments do not produce. At least they cannot produce without first taking in something. I mean, you could make the argument that they might manufacture, so they put their money towards post offices and they create a postal service, which sucks. But yeah, you could say they still produce something. But they would never be able to do that unless they first took from wealth. So they everything that they do is based on taxation, as opposed to in the marketplace where people are based on trade. They get their wealth from trade. Government wealth comes from taking. So if government began without wealth, then they wouldn't be able to tax wealth, therefore they couldn't exist. So it could not possibly have happened where government came before wealth. Wealth has to come first because government needs to take from wealth in order to exist. So if we jump to that conclusion and say that, well, wealth came first, therefore, where does wealth come from? Wealth comes from stability and law and people trading with each other and respecting each other. Then that would imply that government really doesn't create stability. It doesn't create good trading environments. And in fact, people know this stuff. This is why they say when the government lowers taxes, good stuff happens. When the government allows this, that, and the other, it's great. Well, okay, if the good stuff happens when the government allows it, that's just code for the government not being there. That's
Yes, exactly. Yeah, because obviously if they weren't there, everything would be out.
Well, this is it, because we look at the example of cigarettes. You don't want the government say cigarette smoking is bad, therefore we tax it. So if tax is there to discourage it, then you're making a statement about what tax does. It does discourage behavior, and so if that's a good thing, what about rich people? Should we tax them more to discourage people from being rich? I mean, if rich people, we say rich people should pay more tax. Well, what you're doing is you're discouraging rich people then. I mean, that doesn't make any sense. That's why we have so many poor people. Surely, if there's going to be any kind of discouraging going on, we should tax poor people to stop them from being poor. And the more money you make, the less tax you pay. I mean, surely that would be the way you do it. But of course, you suggest that and, people fly off the handle. Rightly so. Because it's not okay to steal from people no matter how much money they make. Anyway, okay. I don't know if you had anything on that, Alec, before I move on.
No, I think that's covered.
Okay. Okay, number 2. We're almost there. You believe that cultivating a group of violent criminals will stop violent crime if we give them nice uniforms, guns, and the ability to unilaterally determine how much money they can take from you and which laws they should enforce upon you and your family, and still maintain this is a rational decision that a person would make given the choice, that democracy is voluntary. And for the people, in inverted commas. Now, I want to admit to a kind of a sneaky thing I did at the beginning of this. You believe that cultivating a group of violent criminals. I know that people don't think they're doing that, but with the understanding that we have of just taking taxation, let alone the fact that they can determine that they can kidnap people and lock them in cages whenever they break an arbitrary law that's made up. I'm not just talking about murder and stuff here, but we're talking about anything. I mean, you don't pay money because we find you. Oh, you go to prison. You give the judge a challenge to their determination in the law. Oh, you go to prison. This kind of stuff. So to say that somebody, which is what happens in democracy, that politicians serve the public, but at the same time they're not subject to you if you don't like what they're doing. Yet if you break one of their laws, you go to prison. You get imagine hiring a butler and then saying, okay, I'm hiring a butler. He's my servant. He's in my home to serve me, to make sure my house goes, to take care of my house. And then all of a sudden he says, hey, you can't walk here after 9 o'clock. Hey, you got to pay me this much. And then if you say, you know what, no, this wasn't the arrangement, I'm actually fired, and they go, you can't fire me, you have to pay me double now. You know what, I'm going to lock you in your bedroom for a period of 3 years. Don't worry, I'll feed you. It's going to be very humanitarian. But it's like, sorry, they're not servants, and you can't you can't maintain that this is something that you would actually do if you were given the choice, that you would appoint people to be able to determine what is right and what is wrong over you, and you really don't have a say in it, aside from every 4 years being able to vote on a person who claims that they know what you want, and then after they get in, change anyway.
Yeah, I think essentially in the example you've given there, you've just illustrated the difference between a private servant and a public servant. I mean, essentially, yes, if you hired someone to do what you wanted them to do, you could fire them, for incompetence, whereas, as you said, with a public servant, you can't possibly do that. And I mean, to take it back to your point there about violent criminals in uniform. It's so, I mean, obviously not to be glib about it, but it is so counterintuitive that people don't seem to understand this stuff, that we, essentially, our taxes pay for the police, our taxes pay for politicians, for judges, everything like that, which we had no say in whatsoever, because you have to pay tax or else you're going to be, there's that coercive threat there of jail, etc., like that, and then, I mean, we elevate them to a position. It's nonsense.
Yeah, I mean, if we were to sit down, a group of us, me, you, and some other guys, and we sat down and we said, okay, we're going to homestead some land, we're going to start over. This is going to be a place that, let's just assume that there's some place on Earth that we could get to where there's no government, and we all get down in there and we say, okay, so we need one of us is going to have to maintain, one of us is going to have to be a judge as a full-time job. We're gonna, one of us has to study out law, study out logic, and maybe provide some security as well, because there's so little of us. Maybe you wouldn't spend all your day just studying, and then we would say, okay, we'll all contribute a small amount of money each, which will make up a decent enough wage. If you need more, you can come to us and ask us. And if we decide that it's too much and you're not providing good enough service, we can withdraw it. I mean, that would be a rational thing that you would do. It's a business decision. Whereas, it would be like us as a group getting together and saying, okay, we're going to make Alec the judge now, and he can determine how much tax he charges all of us. So he, whatever he says is the right tax, we get to pay. And if we disagree, we can submit it in writing to ask Alec, please do make the law not like that, so that we would not be breaking the law if we paid you less. And the laws, if we don't like the laws, we'd also like the opportunity every now and then to vote to say that the laws are good or bad. But it's still up to you. And have you being able to determine all this stuff at any time, and then we don't have any comeback. And if we step out of line, you get to put us into prison and take more stuff. I mean, that would never in a million years happen. And of course, historically, that never happened. You can't explain democracy as that. If you look at the historical record, even in Ireland, what did you say? It was 57% of the electorate put the Constitution in place?
Didn't vote for the Constitution.
57% didn't vote, and that was of the electorate. So we're excluding, I don't know, women, because this was back in the 20s. Non-Catholics, anybody under the age of 20-something, whatever the age of, adulthood was back then or whatever. So, yeah, you're dealing with a very, very small minority of people who actually put democracy in place. And then again, we'll come back to why free school is so important, free education. This is best for everybody. Sorry, but it really isn't. The empirical evidence really, by now, people have enough evidence to be able to see that this is like the biggest failed experiment of all time ever. This is, with the exception of communism. Communism is pretty bad. You look at the millions of people dead because of it. But democracy is up there. It's definitely up there. Okay, so number one, the very last point. Number one, you believe the people of Ireland exist. You believe government exists in reality. Now, this is a great one. I love this one. This is why I saved it to last. Now, you can replace people of Ireland with people of America or people of France or people of, England or whatever. If you were to ask politicians, you say, hey, politicians, are you the government? They would say, no, we steer the government. We're not happy with government. We want to be here so that we can change it. And then you would ask, the Taoiseach or the president, are you the government? And they would say, no, we're at the head. We like to steer government. Then you ask the voters. Are you the government? And they would say, no, of course we're not the government. We vote to get our people into government. And then, I don't know, would you ask the building in Dublin, are you the government? And of course, I wouldn't give you an answer because it's a freaking building. Is there a government? I actually think no. It's this concept. It's this imaginary friend that we have that we hold kids morally responsible when they blame. You come home and your kid's standing there. There's a bunch of broken plates around the kitchen, and he says, my imaginary friend Fred did it. He doesn't say his imaginary. He just says Fred did it, and you would look at him and you go, come on. And so aside from the fact that maybe it was an accident or whatever, you might get over that, but the fact that he then lied to you and said it was somebody who doesn't exist, you'd hold them accountable for that, because kids, they get this intuitively. They come up with this imaginary friend when they start developing this imagination and being able to juxtapose their imagination on the real world. It's kind of fun for them or whatever. But if they ever try to use it as a legal argument for getting out of something like that, we would say, okay, come on, no. But then you get to the age of 18 or 20 or whatever, and you say, I didn't steal from my next door neighbor. The government did it. I didn't go to war. My government did it. I didn't kill anybody. My government did it. I didn't kidnap anybody. My government did it. I didn't spy on anybody. My government did it. Everything that's bad that nobody would ever take credit for. Like, I would never go to my next door neighbor, put a gun to their stomach and say, hey, give me 25% of your money, or whatever it is, 50%, depending on, whatever their situation is, so that I can pay for my hospital bill or my kid's education. Well, we say the government can do it. I guess, could you say the police are the government then? Well, no, the police would say we're subject to we're subject to the laws. There is nobody who's going to claim they're the government. There's not a single person who's going to claim it anymore. I mean, if you had a 100 years ago, King Louis, what was it, l'état c'est moi, he says, I am the government, and everyone kind of like, oh, okay, probably tone this kind of behavior down. Maybe we don't want people saying that kind of stuff. Nobody. I don't think you'll find anybody who will find, you'd be able to find who will say, I am the government. Who do you go to? I don't like the government. I'm going to go to this person and say I don't want to deal with you anymore. It doesn't exist. Not real. Imaginary friend who you get to blame for all the bad stuff that happens in society, that you benefit from. That's the key.
But isn't that I think we're back to the start here. Isn't that the problem though in the first place? That there is that point of deflection where there is a collective responsibility and. There are because there's a lack of individual rights, there's a lack of individual responsibility as well.
That's right. And this is the value of it. There really is a value in the collective when you're dealing with people, especially when there's a system already in place. Now, the biggest issue is that, when it goes on past a couple of generations, people have not experienced the alternative. And they really think that this is normal. I mean, we are in a crazy environment right now. There is nothing normal about the kind of society. Sorry, again, but it's legitimate here because it really means everything. I really am talking about everything. Well, what we have in terms of how we interact with people, and to be able to think in terms of all of Ireland or all of. I mean, how do you don't? Is there any time you would need to look at Ireland as a whole, look at it as some kind of entire entity, or look at the people of Ireland as an entity? I mean, is that useful to even? Is that just a horrible tool that's just rely on?
But I think it is a tool, and it's again we're back to government because it is a tool of government. Because if you look at the one thing that everybody has in common. Who would say to be part of the Irish people, it's that they in some way suffer or in some way benefit from this imaginary thing we call the government. And that's the only way I can see as a common collective point where you could encompass everybody. You could say it's everybody who is paid tax or everybody who receives welfare, whether they're on one side of the fence in terms of having money stolen from them or receiving money that was stolen from other people. You're on one side or the other. That's really where the collective is. And I guess that's the main problem we're dealing with here. If we're saying, the government is basically an imaginary entity that doesn't necessarily exist. If you went looking for it to bring it down, as you said, where would you go? But that's, I think, what, those in a position of power actually want. Because, I mean, if you don't want the government to exist or if you want to change how things run, where do you go? What do you do? The answer is, I don't know.
So it really is just like a kind of collective insanity then.
Yeah, it would be. I mean, you could call it collective hysteria. As you said, like if I said, well, I'm going to steal from you, and then we're going to give that stolen money to somebody you've never met before, and then next year we're going to steal even more money off you in a different way, increase the punishment and take it off you before you've even earned it. Well, then, nobody would vote for a system like that, but nobody would want to be part of a collective where that happened, yet we would all consider ourselves to be part of the Irish people.
So what happened was basically a hijacking of individual desires anyway. I mean, this is basically something we were born into then.
Yes.
And we believed. And I guess this is why the free education, probably that point should have been number one, maybe.
Yeah, that's very good. That's very good because I think we've all been educated.
That's it. Okay, so I think the idea would be to summarize, if you could call people on any of these points and maybe have discussions with them where they can't use the word government or society without actually, like, don't let them off the hook unless they can actually define it. And you might find them, break down in front of you, tears start streaming on their face. I don't know what I'm talking about. This is great. But more likely, probably not. You probably just get a mixture of frustration and infuriation at how small-minded you and I are, Alec, because we just don't understand the greater good. We're too selfish to... only because the government is there to provide us with roads and security, and they sacrifice all this time and work in horrible conditions. We're so ungrateful wanting to get rid of that. And, nonsense like that. So, Alec, thank you so much. If anybody wants to check out your blog, what is it?
Yeah, fractionallyreserved.com. That's 2 L's in the fractionally and reserved, ED, and then .com.
Cool. And my own site is counterintuition.com. That's counterintuition.com. And just a quick Google search on there, or hop onto YouTube and type in counterintuition tube, and you'll find, or just counterintuition, you'll find more of these helpful and hopefully not too controversial podcasts. So, Alec, thank you so much for joining me again. We'll check in again soon, man.
Thanks, Gareth. That's great.